Hi, and welcome back to another session on our financial stewardship series. I'm Pastor Josh, and I'm glad that you're here with us. We're in lesson 5 today, and we're talking about types of budgets. And if you're just starting with us and you haven't seen the other lessons, I want to encourage you to go back, take a look at those lessons, especially lessons 1 and 2, as they deal with the biblical mandate and the biblical foundation for a biblical stewardship. Where in those lessons we look at key attitudes, recognizing God as the owner of all things. We look at attitudes like contentment, we look at attitudes like thanksgiving, and then how to avoid sinful spending and allowing money to be an idol. So if you haven't looked at those, make sure that you look at those. Last week we looked at budgets and looked at how do we create a budget and how do we put that together, and basically the breakdown between your income and then what you're spending. And so you have to do a little homework and put those numbers together. And you need to know what your monthly income is, and then you need to know what you're spending on. And we looked at those categories. We looked at kind of the easy categories, just kind of the big picture categories of spending. And then we had the more detailed breakdown to help you think through the expenses. Oftentimes when folks do a budget, they put together their budget, but they're not aware of all of their expenses the first time they do that. And as they go throughout the month, they realize this bill and that bill and these expenses, they pop in, and they were things that they never really thought about before. So hopefully you did that last week. And what we're going to be doing today is looking at types of budgets. And I really want to challenge you to rethink how you interact with the resources God has given you. I think that this lesson for some of you is going to be kind of a revolutionary way of thinking. I'm hoping it's going to be a real blessing to you. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of these types of budgets, I just want to look to the scriptures and just remind ourselves that we have a biblical mandate, and there's principles in scripture that it's important to God how you manage your finances. And we're going to take a look at our first passage. It comes to us out of Proverbs chapter 13, and we're going to be in verses 21 and 22. Proverbs 13:21 says, "Adversity pursues sinners, but the righteous will be rewarded with prosperity. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, and the wealth of sinners is stored up for the righteous." And so in this passage, we see that there is a contrast and a comparison made between the righteous and the wicked. And that the wicked, he is not rewarded with prosperity, but with adversity. And that's going to be really his reward at the end of his life. Sure, at the beginning it may appear that the wicked are prosperous, but their reward is going to be adversity, but the righteous is rewarded with prosperity. And then he goes on in verse 22 saying, "A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the wealth of the wicked is stored up for the righteous." So you see that comparison that living a righteous life, and there is going to be a benefit, and that benefit is going to make its way out in how you deal with finances. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Let's take a look at Proverbs 15. Proverbs 15:6. And this is what it says: "Great wealth is in the house of the righteous, but trouble is the income of the wicked." And here again, we see the contrast between the righteous and the wicked, and that great wealth is in the house of the righteous, but the wicked have trouble. And this is an ongoing theme that we see in the Proverbs, is that the income and the produce of a righteous life is going to involve lots of things, but one of those things is going to be God's blessing. And in some of God's blessing, that involves material wealth. And so we see that these are just general principles that Scripture gives, that it's important to God how you manage the finances He's entrusted to you. Let's take a look at another one. This is Proverbs chapter 12, and in verse 11. It says, "He who tills his land will have plenty of bread, but he who pursues worthless things lacks sense." And here we see a comparison between the diligent and the lazy. And the lazy lack sense. The lazy person is not going to have the resources at their disposal because they're lazy. But the diligent person who tills the land, who works hard, they're going to have plenty of bread, more than enough. And we know that hard work and wisdom, it results in God's blessings. And I'm not saying that by you following Christ and putting these principles into place, you're going to become wealthy. That's not the point at all. But the point that I'm making is the point that Scripture makes, is that God blesses hard work and righteousness. And when you live your life in a way that's yielded to God, He brings blessings in all sorts of ways. And if your life is yielded to God in the area of your finances, well, don't you think God's going to bless that area too? And so that's really the point. And I want us to see that that working hard, diligence, relying on the Lord, those are real key ingredients that need to be part of our financial stewardship plan. So keep that in mind. Now, as we look today at budgets, I mentioned before that we want to look at budgets, and I really want to challenge the way that you think about things. And I'm going to show you a couple different budgets, and by making a few decisions and sticking to it, they can have real lifelong benefits to your life. So let's take a look at the first budget. If you're taking notes, the first budget is called the zero budget. And as we look at these are really spending-sided budgets. If you want to break budgets down to two categories, you have the spending-sided budgets, and then you have a saving-sided budget. So we're going to take a look at the spending-sided budgets first. And this first one is called the zero budget. And the zero budget gets its name because you allocate every dollar, you look and see, this is my income, these are my expenses, and I need to allocate every dollar. So at the end of the month, every dollar has been earmarked and is applied to one of these areas. So by the time you get to the end of the month, all the money is divided up, and you basically have nothing left. That's a zero budget. So nothing is spent over or under the budget. And some people do this. They want to track every single penny, and that's probably a good thing to start with. But this budget is created, and it dictates how much the family is going to spend every month. And so it becomes a spending ceiling, and it's a limit on their budget. They're saying, hey, we are not going to go over and above this. Remember, our example family from last week was over budget by about $200 every month. And the way that they were able to sustain that is that they kept putting things on the credit card. And each month, their debt increases by $200. Well, the zero budget says, no, we're going to account for every dollar. We're not going to spend more than that. And usually they spend exactly that. So let's look at our example. We have our family that makes $3,000 a month, and after they have given their tithe, their offering, and they give proportionally, so they give $300 a month to the church, they have $2,700 in their budget to spend. And their attitude is, we have $2,700 we've given to the Lord, and so we're going to spend the money on all these things. And so at the end of the month, it zeroes out. So that's one way to do it. And it's saying, hey, we're not going to spend more than we have, but we're not going to spend less than we have. And so that's their prerogative. At least they're not getting themselves into greater debt and into more trouble. So having this type of a budget is better than having no budget at all. And I think a lot of people kind of have this type of budget in their mind, and this is the way they just kind of naturally function, that they just don't want to spend more than what they have. The good thing about this is they've actually put it down on paper, and they're tracking their spending. So let's take a look at a second spending-sided budget, and that's the debt reduction budget. The debt reduction budget is created and specifically intended to pay off debt. So the budget is formatted in a way that cuts expenses in order to allocate extra money to pay off the debt. And so this family has to make some sacrifices, and they have to make sacrifices in several categories. And we looked at our example family last week that was $200 in debt every month. And by making a couple strategic choices, they could reduce their auto expenses. They could cut from entertainment and food. And now they're under budget and they're able to save a little bit. So we'll take that family that they made these painful cuts. It's not something that's easy, but it's something that's doable. And they make the cuts, and they're able to save that extra money and apply it to their debt to pay off the debt. And they use the snowball method where they begin paying off the smaller debts one by one. And as they reduce their debts, they're able to allocate more and more money to the larger debts. So let's take an example. So here's that family. They make $3,000 a month. They're giving to the Lord proportionally. And they manage to cut $250 a month from their budget. And so this means that every month they could apply this $250 to paying down their debt. And if you remember from last time, they had a couple credit card debts. They had a Visa card that was almost $3,000, and they had a MasterCard, which is about $3,500. And so if they apply this $250 a month to both of those credit card bills, they will be able to pay off their debt in 2 years and 2 months. So just by making a choice and the decision, hey, we're going to cut back, we're going to reallocate this money, and we're going to pay off our credit cards. All they have to do now is just stick to the plan. And 2.5 years come by, and guess what? They don't have any credit card debt. And so they may have a car payment, and they may have, well, I guess they don't have a house in that one. But now they don't have any credit card debt, so they're essentially debt-free. And so they've gone from being $200 over budget every month to being $250 ahead of the game. And now they have that $250 where they could decide what to do with it. They could save it, they could spend it, whatever. So once they've paid off their credit card debt, they could divert that $250. Maybe they say, hey, we're on a roll, we're doing good. We're going to divert this extra money to our car payment, and we're going to pay off the car. And so they do that, and in a year or two, the car is paid off. Now they don't have this credit card debt. Now they don't have the auto debt, and they are ahead of the game, and their budget, they're able to save about $500 a month just by paying off their debts. And this money is money that is now available for them to do good. It's not just going to interest. And so this is the debt reduction budget. And some of you are struggling with debt. You have debt, maybe $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, whatever, and it just seems like, man, this is an enormous mountain to climb, and there's no way I could ever get out from under it. Yes, you can. You need to make strategic choices, and you need to stick with it. And if you do that, you will. It's just a matter of time. And so be diligent and make those hard choices, and you'll see the reward and the payoff. So let's go back to our example family. Let's say this example family, they've paid off their credit card debt. They've paid off their car. Okay, by saving $500 a month, that's $6,000 a year that they're able to save. Let's say they just put that in the bank, and they're just getting minimal interest. In 3 years of saving $6,000, they've accumulated $18,000, not counting any interest. And so now they've gone from, we're living paycheck to paycheck. We're getting in debt every month. We're over budget every month, to now we're saving $6,000 a year. And this isn't make-believe. This is just numbers, and it can happen. But the difference is really you need to make choices. And that's what we talked about last week, that you can't just commit to, well, I'm going to get out of debt and then leave it there. No, you have to take action. And sometimes those actions are taking cuts in your entertainment, taking cuts in luxury type of items, taking cuts in just fun type of stuff. But if you do that, you won't regret it. And so I just want to encourage you. You can get out of debt and get to the point where you are able to save. And I want to encourage you with that. So that is the spending sided budget. Either the zero budget or the debt reduction budget, saying, hey, we're gonna allocate as much money and spend as much money as we can to pay off the debt and hopefully to never get back in debt again. So that's the spending sided budget. Let's take a look at the savings sided budget. The savings sided budget it takes the debt reduction budget and it just takes it to a whole new level. And this is what I really want to challenge you about and help you think through. So we have our family that has sat down and they have been thoughtful about their budget, saying, where are we over budget? Where can we cut? And let's say they do those things that we just saw, and now they're debt-free and they're able to save about $500 a month. Now they have two choices. Either they could go back to where they came from and say, hey, we have $500 a month and we're debt-free, so let's go have some fun and let's live it up. And they blow that money, or maybe they get themselves back into debt. I think that's what most people are going to be tempted to do. But I think the wise person is going to say, hey, listen, debt's no fun. It took us so much time to claw our way out of that. It was hardship on the family. Let's do something different. And I really want to challenge you to shift gears and for you to do something different. And what that is say, I'm going to create a savings-sided budget. I'm going to create a budget where I prioritize savings, and I want to be diligent, and I want to be able to save this money with the goal of long-term growth, substantial growth. So in this plan, the intention of the family is to, again, cut back. They've already cut $250 out of their budget by reducing entertainment and reducing food items and specialty type of things. And so now they've said, hey, we've done that and we're still alive. We're still here. We're doing good. Our lives are not miserable. Are there any other areas that we could cut back? And so they do. They're able to cut back a little bit more. And they cut back, they do things like, buying used items. The blender breaks, and rather than going to Walmart and spending $25 for a new blender, they go to Goodwill and they buy an $8 blender. And so they're buying used items that work just the same. They're just being frugal and cutting back, and maybe they're able to squeeze out another $60 of savings a month. So now they are able to save this extra $50, $60 a month, and just with that one, with that one decision, they're able to save up, about $600 a year, and just by cutting back a little extra, saving $50, $60 a month. Now that $600 can go a long way, and again, it just goes to show that cutting back and being disciplined to take action, to stick with it, and not to dip into savings. After a year goes by, they have a pretty good reward there. So we take a look at our example family. They've been able to eliminate their credit card debt, which they were paying about $250 for. They're able to eliminate their auto payment, and so now they're saving about $550 a month plus this extra saving. So they're able to save about $600 a month, and $600 a month, that's a lot of money. And if they just put that away year by year, now they're even further ahead of the game. So if they do that for 2-3 years, now they have saved up a substantial nest egg. The studies show that most Americans don't have access to more than $400 if they needed it. It's the majority of Americans. And so this family has a savings of about $600 every single month, and that just accumulates year by year. And how did they do that? Did they do that by getting a really good, well-paying job? No. Did they get that because a rich uncle died? No. Did they get that because they won the lottery? No. They got that because they made strategic decisions in their budget, and they said, we're going to cut back, we're going to cut frivolous and entertainment type spending, and we're going to prioritize savings for long-term good. They've made that decision and they've stuck to it. They've refused to accumulate more debt, and they've refused to dip in to their savings. Now, maybe they might have an emergency or something and might have to dip into it a little bit, but they have this overall trend of savings. And so they're saving, and their account balances are increasing every month and every year. And so that's a savings-sided budget. Okay, and this budget prioritizes savings. Maybe you need to take a look at your budget, and as you look at those categories that we saw, giving to the Lord, your rent, all these things, maybe to put in there savings, and to say, hey, we're going to prioritize saving X amount of dollars every month. And that's non-negotiable. That's like paying the rent. Like we're not going to fudge on that, and we're going to just take that money and put it in the bank. We're going to save it. And you'll be amazed after a year or two goes by that you do that. It becomes a habit, but you see the accumulation take effect. So that is a savings-sided budget. It's a new way of thinking. And I want to challenge you to think in a different way. Rather than just spending everything that you have, that you can really accumulate a good nest egg, but it takes diligence on your part. It takes that commitment. Let me show you a third budget. Okay, and this is called the 10-70-20 budget. And the 10, 70, and 20 budget, they stand for percentages of your income. And so let's just take a look at how that would work. On all of these budgets that we've looked at, we've always began with giving to the Lord, proportional giving, and looking at right there around 10%, maybe more. I think that as time goes on and as you prosper, that you should increase your giving. So the way that the 10-70-20 budget works down is we begin with the budget saying, hey, we're given proportionally to the Lord. Around 10%, and so that 10% comes right off the top. That goes to the Lord, and based on what's left, I'm going to break it down into another 10%, 70%, and then 20%. And let me show you how this works. So I'll give you an example of a family. They're making $4,000 a month. That's their take-home income, and they've already determined that they're going to give to the Lord, and so they're giving proportionally, so that means they're giving $400 a month to the Lord. And now their spending income is $3,600. So we take that $3,600 and we break it down into 10, 70, and 20% increments. So the first 10% of what's left over after giving, they're saying, hey, that 10%, what does that go to? That goes directly to savings. We're committing to save 10% of our income. Given 10% to the Lord, and we're going to save 10%. And so they're contributing this to their savings. And every month, they take right out of their paycheck after they give, 10% goes into savings. And the savings might be in any type of savings vehicle, but it's liquid savings. And when I say liquid, I mean that it's readily accessible. It goes into a bank account, or it goes into some other account that's relatively liquid. They wouldn't buy an investment car, some classic car that, it might be worth $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, but they can't get the cash out of it readily. And so these are in kind of liquid accounts, money market accounts, emergency fund, savings accounts. Maybe they go into something that is a little bit more of a long-term savings, like a CD. Either way, they're putting this money away into savings that if they needed to, they could get at them. So for this family, if they're allocating 10% of their spendable income to savings, that's $360 every month. So every month it's $360. So this becomes a whopping $4,320 a year. And so they've just gotten into the custom of this, saying, "Hey, listen, we're prioritizing our savings, and we're going to be diligent in savings." And so they're able to save this $360 a month. Well, that builds up fast. So you have more than $4,000 at the end of the year. Let's say they just stick with this, and they just stick with this, and they're consistent and diligent, and we catch up with them 5 years down the road. How much money do they have in the bank? Well, not counting interest, they have $21,600. $21,000, like that's a substantial nest egg, especially that most Americans couldn't come up with $400 in an emergency. They have $21,000 sitting in the bank. They could go tomorrow and take that out if they wanted to, but they're not going to do that because they're being wise and they're savings. So the 10-70-20 budget is a budget that says, hey, we're prioritizing savings, and savings is going to be serious to us. We're treating it like we would our rent or our mortgage or any other bill. So this is an important thing. Okay, so that's the first 10%. What about the next 70%? The next 70%, this is their living expenses. And so the family has chosen to live on 70% of their income. And you might be thinking, like, 70% of their income? Like, who could live on 70% of their income? Especially, they're making $4,000 a month. This is a pretty modest income for an American family. And yet, they're saying, hey, we're living on this, we're going to live below our means and intentionally live and spend only 70% of our income on living expenses. This comes to about $2,500 a month, a little bit more than that. But in order to do this, yeah, they have to be frugal. That shouldn't be a shock. They have to be frugal, they have to live a modest life, but they know that the sacrifice is worth it. And they know that it's worth it because they know that what they're able to save and what they're able to grow in their money is going to be a lifelong benefit for them, and not only for the next generation, but even the generation beyond theirs. And so they live differently. It's a different way of living. They refuse to have debt, credit card debt or auto debt. They pay for things outright. Things haven't always been like this for them. They've had their share of debt, but they've gotten out of it, and they say, we're not going back. Like, no way. You couldn't pay me enough to go back into debt. And so they have gotten out of debt, and now they're living a frugal lifestyle. And the choices they make now are going to have a drastic impact on how they're able to live in the future. But the time being, it's tough. They have to be frugal, and they have to just live on 70% of their income, and that's doable. And it may seem like it's an impossibility, but it is, and it takes short-term sacrifice. Maybe instead of living in a larger home, renting a larger home, that you say, hey, listen, we have to move. And we need to move to a smaller place. Maybe it's not as nice. Maybe it's not going to impress our family when they come over. Maybe it's not going to be as comfortable. But if we can save on our rent by moving and taking a strategic move, maybe that alone might save you $200, $300, $400, $500 a month. And you save that up for 5 years, and with that nest egg, then you're able to maybe buy your own home. So this is what they have decided to do. So they're saving 10% right off the bat. They're living on 70%. Well, what about the extra 20%? What's going on with this? And this 20% in the 10-70-20 budget is they prioritize appreciating assets. This is long-term savings with the aim towards growth. And so they take this last 20% of their income and they apply it to long-term growth. So they're buying stocks and bonds and mutual funds. They have brokerage accounts that they're putting it into appreciating assets. They're putting it into maybe precious metals, silver and gold. They're putting it into real estate. You say, whoa, like, wait a second. Real estate, like, how are you going to buy real estate making $4,000 a month? And that might be your attitude. You're thinking here, hey, I'm just a college student, or I have a modest income. I could barely afford my rent. Things are tight right now. How am I supposed to buy a real estate? Well, just hold that question and track with me for a while. And so as they save up this 20%, that it not only accumulates, but it grows. And so they have their yearly savings, but this yearly savings is put into appreciating assets that are going to grow and generate income. And so the money that they save, they apply that to things that are going to produce more income. So rather than spending that money in entertainment type of categories, maybe they say, hey, listen, I have a hobby and I enjoy making, certain items, and they say, I'm going to turn that into a business. So I'm taking this money that I've accumulated as seed money to create my business, and this business is something that I would do as a hobby anyway, but now it turns into generating income. Or they put the money into stocks, and those stocks grow. Or they take the money and they put it into a money market account or whatever. The point is that they are putting this money into a long-term growth vehicles. And rather than spending the money and having it's gone and they have nothing to show for it, they've not just spent that money, but that money is working for them and creating further wealth and opportunity for them. So let's go to the case of this family. So they make it $4,000 a month. They're given to the Lord right off the top. That $3,600 that's left over, they break it down into 10, 70, and 20%. They're saving the 10%. They're living on the 70%, and the 20% is going into long-term savings. So for our family that is putting 20% of their spendable income into long-term growth, this means that about $720 a month they're putting in their stock market accounts or whatever they've chosen to do. Let's say that they stick with this for 1 year, just 1 year. That's $8,640, not counting interest, not counting the growth and appreciation. And if our family does this and they stick to that for 5 years, how much will they have? Saving $8,000 a year, $8,600 a year. In 5 years, if they stick to it, that's $64,800. And that's not counting the growth on top of just the money that they've put in. And you asked earlier about real estate. Like, man, I could never get into real estate. I could never buy real estate. Well, if you're diligent in saving month by month and year by year, after 3, 4, 5 years, you will have a nest egg. And with this nest egg and being smart about buying, yeah, you could get into real estate. Now, that's not something that is out of the question. Let's say this family, they've been living modestly. They've been living on 70% of their income. Maybe they've been renting a home, and it's a small home. The rent is reasonable, but they have stuck to it. And let's say they've accumulated this $64,000. and they say, you know what, maybe it's time for us to buy a home. Like we've never lived in a home before. The market is down. It's kind of a good opportunity to buy, and they start looking at homes, and they could afford it with $64,000. They could put the money down. Their real estate agent is trying to show them homes that are bigger, more expensive, that would kind of fit their monthly budget, but they're smart. And they're saying, hey, listen, just because we can afford it and just because we have money in the budget, we're not going to blow everything in our budget. We want to try to sustain what we've been doing so far. And so they start thinking, hey, rather than buying a single family home, why don't we buy a duplex? We buy a duplex at a good price. The mortgage is going to be about the same as what we are paying for rent, renting a home. But the other side of the duplex, we're able to rent out and generate income. And now they've not only bought another appreciating asset, not only have they kind of locked in their housing expense in their budget, well, now they're able to rent out the other side of that property and make $700, $800, $900, maybe $1,000 a month in rent. And now they've gone from having a $4,000 a month income. Now they're making $5,000 a month. Plus they're able to save their 10%, and they're able to save the 20%. And so by making that choice and buying that home and buying a home that's going to generate income for them, now they're able to save, what is that, $15,000, $16,000 a year. And if they continue to do that, after 5-10 years, what's their family going to be like? And what are they going to be able to do? So you might be going through a tough time. Maybe you're in debt and things are tight, and boy, you're just really struggling, and it's tough, and you think there's no way that I could get out of this debt. Yes, you can. You could get out of that debt. You can do something that's good for your family. The thing is you need to make choices, and you need to make hard choices. Yeah, it's fun to kind of blow the money. It's kind of fun to live in a wasteful, kind of frivolous way, but it's not fun at the end of your life when you've just squandered things. And so you could make real change in your life by taking significant measures, making decisions, wise decisions, cutting back, saving, and sticking with it. Right? There's no secret here. Right? This is something that it's not rocket science, and this is something that you could do. It's not easy. I didn't say it was easy, but it is something that you can do. It takes discipline, hard work. But as you do this, and as you cut your budget, and you get into a point where you could save monthly, it's kind of a shock to you, but you get used to it. We're here in Southern California, and like to go to the beach. Sometimes you get to the beach a little bit early in the summer, the water's cold, or a little bit late in the summer and the water's cold, and you get in the ocean, and it shocks you because it's cold, and it takes a while. You're not quite comfortable, but after 5 or 10 minutes, you start to get used to it. You get acclimated to it. And that's the same way that budgets work. And that for you to go from a budget where you're in debt, getting in more debt every month, cutting back is going to be a shock. And it's not going to be pleasant. It's going to be hard for you, but you get used to it. And as you pay off that debt, be wise with what you do with that money that you were putting towards debt. Begin to save it and make good decisions and stick to it. And as you move from a spending-sided budget to a saving-sided budget, stick with it and make wise decisions where you're purchasing these appreciating assets. This is something that you can do, and I want to encourage you to do it. Just a personal story for my wife and I. When we were married, as we were going through our premarital counseling, we had to put together a budget. We looked at what she made, what I made. We know that our long-term plans were for Nicole to be a stay-at-home mom. She wanted to homeschool, and we looked at the budget, and we kind of worked it out, and we saw that we couldn't afford the lifestyle that we wanted. And we were planning to have a 2-bedroom apartment after we got married, and planning to do this and that and different trips and stuff. But then we really thought through it, and we said, you know what, let's sacrifice and let's be extra frugal for the first part of our marriage to give us some breathing room when the kids come along. And that's what we did. So we reformatted our budget, and we said, we're going to commit to living on just my budget or my income. And Nicole was a medical biller. She worked full time, so she had a pretty good, decent income. And we committed to, we're just going to give on what she makes, give to the Lord, and we're going to save the rest. And we're going to just live on my income and whatever sacrifices we need to make. So when we got married, we got a little 1-bedroom apartment, not so great part of town, and that was a sacrifice, but we loved it. We were newlyweds, and we didn't need a big place or anything. We didn't have any children, and so we could get by just very frugally, and we did that for 3 years. And just that one decision of saying we're going to live on just one of our income, we're going to save the rest, that created and set in motion this whole set of circumstances that when we bought our home, we were able to put down a good down payment, and we were able to actually save money. We were paying less for our home than what we were paying rent for. And it's just kind of mind-blowing, but we were able to put down that much of a down payment. And that allowed us to really format our lives in a way that when we did have children, Nicole could be a stay-at-home mom. And we didn't really need her income. Her income was good and was a benefit, but we really didn't need it. And so now Nicole is able to be at home with the children, stay-at-home wife and mom. And we're not wealthy people. I'm a pastor. I make a modest income, but by making sacrifices and being strategic about things, that you can set things up in a way that are really going to be beneficial for you. And so I just want to encourage you to make the hard choices, and it will be uncomfortable at first, but you'll get acclimated to it, and it'll be worth it. You'll never regret it. If you are wise with finances, you won't regret it. If you're frivolous and if you blow the money, you are going to regret it. And you're going to look back and say, had I just saved $100, $200, $300 a month starting 5 years ago or 10 years ago, what would that mean for me today? And you'll regret not doing that. But if you're diligent, and if you make the sacrifices, and if you structure your budget in a way where you prioritize giving to the Lord, and then savings, and then growth, you will never regret it. You will be so glad that you did. And what will this mean for the rest of your life? What will this mean for your family? You'll be able to help your family in need. You'll be able to help the kids with college and tuition. Maybe help them start their own business or to buy a home. What's this going to mean for the church? You might be thinking of these numbers and saying, oh, hey, like our family, they're saving $700 a month. That's $8,000 a year. We don't really need to save $8,000 a year. And it's like, okay, well, maybe you need to up your giving and say, hey, we're going to give, instead of 10% to the Lord, we're going to give 15%. Or 20%, or we're going to support missionaries. By you having a budget where you're saving and accumulating wealth, that gives you opportunities to do things that you never would have thought possible. Opportunities for the church, opportunities for your family, and opportunities for you. And I hope this was a different way of thinking, that you think about budget in a totally different way. Because having a budget, it shouldn't just be a limit on your spending, but having a budget should be really a way for you to maximize and plan out your savings. And so I want to encourage you to make adjustments to your budget. If you haven't made a budget already, make a budget, get out of debt, and get to the point where you're saving month by month, year by year, and watch as that accumulation is used wisely to really bless the Lord and bless the people in your life. So I want to encourage you to do that. If you do that, you won't regret it. Well, we're going to end it there, and we will see you next week. God bless.